Dena Roland, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I was reading your story and it's incredibly interesting, and I would love to hear. Please tell us about your history and your experience with ketamine and what led you to it.
Yeah, so in 2016, I had suffered for 20 plus years, and in 2006, so I tried electric shock, different therapies. I was very severely, I was inpatient constantly, and I had tried 40 plus medications with no relief. And so in 2016, my doctor comes to me and says, "We have nothing else for you." Um, that's the worst thing you could possibly hear, mentally ill. And so I left very defeated that day and went home and did not know what we were going to do. And so I was one night on a Yahoo News thread, and an article popped up and it said, "Party drug hailed as the new miracle for the mentally ill." And I clicked on it, and it was about ketamine infusion. And so I immediately started reading about it and did my due diligence. I called the National Institute of Mental Health, which they actually did have a study going on. And they wanted me to sign up to be a part of it, but it was like an inpatient, and I have a 5-year-old. So I was very lucky. There was only about 3 clinics at the time, and 2 of them were on the East Coast. So one was in Princeton, New Jersey, another one in New York City, and another one in California. And so I'm only about 3 hours from Princeton, New Jersey. So I called them, and the universe aligned, and they said, "You know what? If you wait 1 month, we're actually opening our next branch in your home city." And so that was it. I waited 1 month and I called the office. I was the first patient ever in this clinic and the first patient in the state. And I went in for my consultation, and a week later I started ketamine infusion. I've had now in 8 years 44 infusions, and now I only need them. I've healed so far in my healing that I only need them now twice a year. And I've only been needing them twice a year for about 4 years now.
Wow, and that's instead of. I mean, do you mind going into like the treatments that didn't work and like what?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I did 42 electric shock therapy sessions from 2005 to 2009, and that was quite the most awful thing I could have possibly did for myself. I have a lot of side effects from that still to this day, like mental memory, a lot of memory loss. I also was in a lot of therapy. I was inpatient a lot. I was almost like a revolving door for me. I would go in for, and we're not talking like a 3-day hold. We're talking 4, 6, 8 weeks at a time. I'd be inpatient. And then I'd come back out and I try to work like like a human being has to do. And I'd break down again, and I'd go back in and they would try new medications. And I tried 40 plus medications with no relief. It was just, I was kind of like a guinea pig. It was just like every time I went into inpatient again, they were changing another medication, another medication, another medication. And I just had zero relief for 20 plus years of my life. It was just, it started in 1994. And in 2016, I found ketamine infusion. I did not, I was at the point with ketamine infusion, like when I found ketamine infusion, that I can honestly say that I was at the point of, I was kind of thinking of the end um, at that point, because there was just nothing else. And I did not think I could live the rest of my life feeling the way I did. I had intrusive thoughts. I had suicidal ideations. I had the negative inner monologue, racing thoughts, constant all day, every day. And I didn't know if I could live the rest of my life after they told me they had nothing else. So it was just the universe aligning that ketamine infusion just was on the internet one day. And that they found they opened a branch in my home city, and it's only about 35 minutes from me. So I began, and it was very interesting because my doctor, I was his first patient ever. And he was actually an eye doctor who was going back to school at Johns Hopkins. And so we were learning, like when I say none of us knew what we were doing, like none of us. So it was a lot of learning process, a lot of mistakes along the way. I started when there was no such thing as a ketamine coach. There was no such thing as guidance. They really just thought that it was the administering of the ketamine and not even a possibility of the experience, the healing process, and the integration. There was just no such thing when I began. Even, there wasn't even Spravato at that point. That didn't even come along for another 3 years. So it was very much a learning process. I realized very early on in my infusions that there was something to that experience that you have. So, when you're in your infusion and you go into your experience, there's a lot of like messages and insights. And I realized this very early on because I would come out of my infusions going, why did that loop in my head? Why is it telling me to do these things? Why? So it was a lot of whys in the beginning. And so I started to realize that if I really tried hard after my infusion, when I had my relief, when I had my silence in my brain for periods of time, if I worked really hard after the infusion and figured out why my messages were going on, and then also created goals to kind of take myself, I had lived so long mentally ill that my coping skills were just survival. I was just trying to survive when I was mentally ill. But now, as I was becoming a healthy minded individual, I had to learn and relearn. And not only did I have to learn about myself because I had masked for 20 plus years, so I didn't even know what I liked or enjoyed, but I also had to learn new coping skills and learn healthy ways to cope because my mind, I had that silence. I didn't have to go to those fight or flight. I didn't have to go to those just survive another day type of coping skills anymore. So I realized if I started to work really hard in between the times of my infusions with goals, which I call intentions moving forward, that I was not only seeing more time on the back end and getting more time in between, but I was getting the stronger symptom relief. So, which now we know, and we didn't really know what was going on when I began because scientifically they just didn't know. Now we know that the neural pathways connect, and by working really hard afterwards and setting goals and integrating, that's the key word, integration, that we can make those good feelings, the silence and the peace, and extend our time out because we're creating these neural pathways to stay permanent by doing this step. And what's great is one of the biggest things about ketamine integration is that your assignment is to go do something you enjoy every single day, even if it's for 10 minutes, because it is scientifically proven that the more you do that, the more permanent your neural pathways become. And so your assignment is go find things you enjoy. Things that they've realized with integration is things like walks in nature, journaling, doing things with your hands. And I think it all comes back to kind of like, because you're silent, you're able to go in your head and, you can actually enjoy your peace. I think that's a big part of it. And so that's just one part of the integration. But I realized that the more that I try to do something I enjoyed, and I love to do art, so I would always do things with my hands, I just saw the correlation happen. And then all of a sudden there's something called ketamine integration. So I didn't even know I didn't know that there was even such a thing called integration, but I was doing it. So then as they made a term for it, it was like, I'm doing it right. I'm doing this right. We also, in your infusion, with your integration, during your infusion, you're doing a lot of healing. So we've realized that if you set an intention also before your infusion, like a goal, right? Something you want to heal or something you want to accomplish, it kind of makes your infusion and your experience more of a GPS like focus. So it kind of like it'll lead you to where you want to navigate. So I say it like a GPS because your intention is you may have like different terms like detours, just like a GPS, but at the end of the day, you're going to get to the destination. So when you set your intention during your infusion, a lot or treatment, any of the treatments really, like any way to get administered, you create like a direction. So there's like, so as a coach, I teach that. I teach them, and that's something that we do is we set the intention so that you can go in, so you are optimizing every bit of that healing experience every bit of the benefits of the time in the chair. Because the fact of the matter is you're able to get out of your own head, and it's like you almost your first taste of kind of like your peace and silence. So for that 40 minutes, a little bit beyond, to come out of it, it is such a healing experience, and you learn so much. So many times my clients, we integrate things that happen because of the infusion, because all of a sudden, for example, they may be like, okay, I need to set boundaries. All of a sudden their brain's like, nope, boundaries, I'm done. And they come out of it. So that's something that we do. That's an integration, is because what's what their brain, that their subconscious, which is probably like the most wise part of your body, and it got stuffed down because all the trauma and the mental illness comes out and is able to talk to you and lead you and incite with all these insights and get your back and tell you you're worth it and tell you you got it. You know what I mean? So we integrate all that when they come out, when they have that strength and that confidence and things that they've learned in their infusion, we integrate those in to their daily lives. Because a lot of times it's something they've always known they had to do, but it took the infusion, almost like an aha moment during your experience, to really get them the ball rolling. And that's another part of integration, is really taking what you're learning about yourself and the journey to the truest you, really, and healing and growing from these infusions when you take that time in that chair to really go in yourself. It's an amazing amazing healing tool. Truly is. I have come from the depths of the worst and have healed and healed and healed. And that's the beauty of ketamine infusion, is there's no stopping. I've never seen a ceiling to your healing. It never stops. You can never look at ketamine as ever having a finish line, because you're continuously growing and healing and moving forward and becoming the truest you. So yeah, it's definitely, you can see I have so much passion for for ketamine and the integration. There's a correlation. They're seeing it, how important the work you do after correlates to the success of your ketamine. They're just seeing,
Yeah. One thing that I was imagining, and maybe, and this I think would make sense to you as an artist, is that it seems like our minds are like, our minds are like clay, and maybe a hardened piece of clay, maybe not completely hardened, maybe you can mold it with some effort, but you can put it maybe in an oven or add some water, whatever you'd have to do to activate it. Let's call that the ketamine. And now you have a piece of clay you can really mold, but if you don't mold it right, you might get lucky and improve, or you could make it worse, or minimally improve. But you have to have a master artist there, maybe overseeing and like, let's go in this direction and mold it this way, mold it that way, and make something beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as a ketamine coach, I actually have one now. Even after 8 years, like I grabbed one about 2 years ago, and it accelerated my healing. Like I had been there 6 years and doing my thing, right? Clearly I was doing it right. But when I got a coach to help me accountable and set goals, and I bounced my infusions off them and told them about it, and then I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the way I have to go. And they're holding me accountable and checking in, and also when you have a coach, that someone like me who has 8 years of experience, I'm getting the same victories and going the same journey as you are. You know what I mean? Like I was right there on the front lines too. I can completely relate and understand even every obstacle. The thing is most people that begin ketamine, or chances are they're usually on one of they've tried a lot, they've exhausted a lot of ways, before they even began ketamine. So they have a lot of worry. They have a lot of, is this working? A lot of, I'm not sure. And so I'm able to calm those nerves and explain to them, put your head down, work, keep moving forward. These are normal. And these, just to even have that wisdom to explain, having a coach that has that wisdom to calm their nerves and just teach them how to do an infusion, because there is a way that you can really benefit and optimize your infusions. going into an infusion, like kind of like molding, going into infusion and not knowing what you're doing, it's really hard to, if somebody's already telling you, hey, look, this is what you got to do. You go in with a mindset that you're the healing tool, you're the healer, and ketamine's just the tool that opens those areas to access so you can do your healing. When you're teaching them that, instead of them, most people go in like, oh, it's just the administration of medication. And instead, you're going in, dog, stop. You're going in and telling, explaining to them the mindset and getting them almost like they're the boxer. The ketamine's the boxing gloves. And I'm the manager on the shoulders going, okay, this is what you get. I can't fight your fight, but I can get you ready. I can train you, get you ready, lead you the way, be the biggest backer, support that you need when, sometimes you have others that are questioning why you're doing something. You know what I mean? That's that helps the ketamine patient to really be able to focus on what they need to do, because they don't have to worry. You know what I mean? They're really able to integrate better because they don't have to worry. I'm there every step of the way, alleviating everything they need to, and teaching them. And it's crazy, the success rates.
Yeah.
It's crazy. When especially when they're ready to do it, because it's a journey, so you have to be ready. So it is like taking it and molding it and creating like almost like a new you. I don't want to say it's like a new you, but like you're not mentally ill anymore, so you're two different individuals. You know what I mean? You really are. So part of my job is to help them learn better coping skills and ways to deal, and just to learn better ways, because they don't need to just survive anymore. So now it's time to
Yeah.
live. So a lot of what I do in integration is helping them, um, get into that realm, like that thought process of I need to live now, not just survive.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
was wondering from your experience in working with people, um, how much of depression is internal? Like, and I know they used to say, oh, yeah, people have a chemical imbalance, and now that's being kind of disproven that that was never the issue. But also, uh, like, how much of it is external? Like, maybe a person's like, I'm so depressed, but they're dealing with caring for elderly parents, and they can't really get
Yeah.
out of it. They're in a bad relationship at a bad job, and
I
maybe a
don't,
life change could
yeah,
make all the difference.
I honestly think so. I think that, I've worked with hundreds of people now, and I think the bulk of it is trauma based
Yeah.
that's manifested. So they weren't able to deal. They had hushed. They just couldn't mourn their trauma, basically. If they weren't ready, or let's say society didn't let, or something, right? Something. I feel like a lot of it is because, not that I try to talk about the past, but sometimes when they're talking about their infusion, past will come up. So a lot of times I learn about their past through, because they were processing it during their infusion. And so I feel like a lot of it was the environment or trauma that they endured that got pushed down so far, and then the perfect storm happened. It might have been, with that, they had external environment, abusive parents, something, right? Or they're taking care of their parents and there's huge stress on them. That's how mine came actually about, like really exploded. Was I had a sexual assault when I was younger. I wasn't able to talk about it. I was silenced. Then about 20, so I was suffering PTSD the whole time. I didn't really know, they didn't really talk about what PTSD in the 90s. About 20 years old, the perfect storm happened. I was in college, was working myself to death. I was staying up late nights trying to be the perfect person. And just like I pretty much drained myself to nothing. And then boom, like it just exploded. Like just the perfect storm happened, and my mental illness exploded into severe, just absolutely out of control, severe mental illness. And I really attribute that from not being able to deal. I really feel like if I had been able to deal with that, like when I was younger, I don't feel like that hushness and that silence, I don't feel like I would have exploded. It wouldn't have been the perfect storm. But because of everything, so I feel like a lot of times it's environmental, it's trauma, stuck down. It could, it could be even genetic, I mean, I feel like it's just a perfect storm.
Yeah. And that's not probably not something a person should just go like there's I know that there's some ketamine clinics that will administer the medication and they don't provide therapy and maybe they'll tell people we recommend that you get therapy somewhere and maybe that might work or maybe that isn't ideal, but a person I would think should not be alone with just getting the medication and now those kinds of things come up and would that be difficult to deal with like traumas that come up and now you're confronting them.
It's interesting that you say that because from what I have experienced, um, ketamine, when you're healing in your infusion and things are coming up, ketamine is a dissociative and anesthetic versus all other psychedelics.
Yeah.
So when you're in your infusion, you are kind of deep, almost in, and then you're pulled back. So the way I look at it is, because I know all about the other psychedelics, like I'm certified in that as well. The other psychedelics kind of put trauma in your face. Ketamine, it's almost like you're watching your own movie and you're pulled back.
Yeah.
So when you're processing your trauma inside your infusion, it's a very safe place. It's very safe in there because you're pulled back and it's almost like your emotions are detached. So you're seeing the trauma that has happened without an emotional attachment to it. So it's a very safe place. So a lot of ahas, a lot of, oh no, that's not going to control me anymore. A lot of warrior mode comes in because you're seeing it and you're like, oh no, I'm not letting that happen anymore. So a lot of times, so it's a very like safe place in there. I absolutely love, and it's sad because right now a lot of clinics do not offer therapy or even suggest it. There's a lot of no guidance clinics that it's really sad. I think because 900 of them have popped up, you have a lot of burn and turn clinics right now, which
Yeah.
worrisome. So they don't provide any guidance, no therapies, no even suggestions of it. I love working side by side with a therapist because they can really dive deep in the processing. Like I'm not a therapist. So if you bring in to the conversation during your infusion, your past is one thing, but I don't go there. Like I speak in present and forward. And of course I don't diagnose. So the therapist is able to really go deep dive safely and also set goals with, stop that. They can also set goals with their client, their patient, and let me know what goals they decide to set and I can reinforce them. So it's actually very, very beneficial for somebody to have a therapist that is on board with ketamine. Not all of them are, but if they are on board with, and they're able to work with me, it is such a strong relationship to
Yeah.
have to work with a therapist because they're able to really dive deep and be safe processing it with them. They process with me and I just hold space. That's my job, is I hold their space. So when they're upset and they're emotional, they know that they're safe with me, that they can be, what they need to do. But that's as far as I take it because I'm not a therapist. In that sense, I'll let them know, hey, listen, this is something you need to work on this week with your therapist. Let's set goals. And then a lot of times I work with the therapist. So I'm able to email them and say, hey, listen, this is what, this came up and I suggested y'all, work on some goals. If you could let me know what those goals are, it's a very, very good working relationship when they have a therapist as well.
Yeah.
Of course, I appreciate when they have a ketamine assisted therapist or somebody that specializes in like psychedelic, more so, but if somebody, as long as they're on board, we can work together absolutely to really create a very safe relationship and just a powerful healing, tool within the client.
Yeah. It's kind of like an athlete has a therapist and a coach. Well, I mean, in the case of athletics, you have a physical therapist,
Yeah.
and you're not going to ask your physical therapist how we're going to win the game tonight. And then you
100%.
might tell your coach, well, my arm's hurting. We'll go talk to the therapist about that. So they're different roles. And they're
100%.
both important.
And they work great together. That's what's great is, yes, we're two different roles, but we work very well together. And it is, we've learned that infusions are healing. So take advantage of that. Talk to a therapist, work it out because you are processing things. there, every infusion is different, but there's always, when they're talking to me and they're on, and we call it unpacking their infusion, things come up. Things come up. And it may be symbolic. It may not be like exactly what, but they know, oh, this definitely represented blah, 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 blah of my trauma or of my mental illness or something. Things will come up and they're safe in their infusion, but afterwards there is purging, which is emotion, or it can be emotion, it can be crying, and things can come out. So I think it's a very, very beneficial to have a therapist. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost I feel like for clinics that don't offer any coaching or any type of therapy, or even, here's a list of therapists that could work with you. I feel like that's just injustice to these patients. It really is, because they're literally gonna get minimal. I mean, yes, ketamine will do stuff, but they're gonna get minimal amount. When you start putting all these healing tools in the play, like it explodes in the healing, explodes in your symptom relief,
Yeah.
and it's cumulative. So,
There's one group of patients that I work with, and they'll be interested to hear our perspective on this. People that have been on medications for years that have been toxic to them, and in most cases with me and my patients, it's benzodiazepines. Like for example, a patient who was prescribed maybe Klonopin, Xanax, or Ativan, or one of those are the big ones, and
yeah.
Valium maybe, and then they're put on it intentionally, maybe to be on it for a couple of weeks, and then month
Oh,
after month it goes on for like decades, like 20, 30 years,
yeah.
and then they learn all these years later that the medication is toxic and causing problems for them, and coming off of it is a really difficult, prolonged process. And
Yeah.
some people unfortunately go to these rehabs or detoxes because it's not an addiction, it's a physical dependence, and
Oh, absolutely.
they're treated like it's an addiction, and tapered too quickly, and they end up with protracted withdrawal, and they can be very, very sensitive to any kind of medication. So like I've recommended ketamine therapy to some people in that situation, and they're resistant to it because they're like, well, that's just another drug. But
And it's a healing tool. They have to get in the
yeah,
mindset it's a healing tool. It's not just a drug. And the drug's out of your system, right? Before you walk out, it's like in tracing
yeah,
out. So it's not something that you administer every day. I am that unfortunate person but I was on Xanax for 15 years, 3 times a day.
oh well, so you've been
Yeah,
through that.
I only keep some for flying now, but
Mhm.
I was able to come off of it with help of my infusions, because all of a sudden my anxiety wasn't so debilitating that I was like, I don't really think I need that. And so I just, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So with the guidance of my psychiatrist, we kept cutting it down,
yeah,
and less and less. And then I was able to come off of it. But I get what you're saying. The and also no, I just found out yesterday that I have high liver enzymes that they are attributing to my psych medications that I've been on.
yeah,
So, which honestly, if they would have said the medication like Xanax or anything like that, hey, you're going to be physically dependent. Like it's going to be hell to get off of something like this.
yeah,
They would like even say, I'd be like, no, please don't give me something like that.
yeah,
What I mean?
yeah. You wish that they had given you that informed consent in the beginning, that this is
Absolutely.
going to be really hard to get off of.
Absolutely. And there was quite a few of those medications that
Yeah,
um,
it's not just the benzos. A lot of the psych drugs have that
yeah,
physical
and
dependence and very difficult to get off of.
at one point I was in inpatient, they had put me on astronomical amounts of Seroquel, and I started getting tardive dyskinesia in my face. Well, thank
Oh,
goodness I had gone to school for psychology. So I knew exactly what was happening to my face, and I immediately was like, get me off this. So it did not become permanent, thank God. But that's just but I was a zombie. Like they just don't tell you, hey, look, this medicine could possibly cause this or this or that. They just don't. And I think
yeah,
especially with informed, and another one was Lamictal for me. Nobody told me that the physical dependence lasted for months
yeah,
after I come off of it. And I had tapered just like I was supposed to, with my psychiatrist going down little by little for months. And
yeah,
the last 25 milligrams, it lasted, the restless leg, everything lasted for months. And so it was awful.
yeah,
And I think informed consent, if they would have said, hey, listen, this is a really hard medication to come off of. I wouldn't have even tried it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of psychiatrists, when they manage tapers, they probably also do it too quickly. And I think a lot of them do it linearly,
Yeah.
where they do like straight down, like where it should be what they call a hyperbolic curve, like that kind of curve that gradually approaches the
Yeah.
baseline, where you slow down, you start out maybe a little faster, and the tapering should be really gradual as you get towards the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the harder medications that I came off of by far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And my psychiatrist, when I began infusions, was totally against infusions. I actually had to go
oh
against
wow.
everything that she stood for, kind of like I can remember the look on her face when I was like, listen, you're gonna get on this ship with me or get off, because like there's no other options. I'm like, you're telling me to do this. You're telling me to do the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again, getting no result. Like I'm doing the exact same thing. I was like, we have to do something different. I was like,
Yeah.
literally, I am by a string living, like zero quality of life. The I was started getting symptom relief within the first infusion. And it's cumulative. So it grew in symptom relief. But I remember walking out of there with a smile on my face, something I hadn't done or hadn't forced in like 20 years. I always masked and put the smile on my face. Everybody thought I was happy, but I was dying inside. I was absolutely dying inside. And the only times they knew that I was really bad is when I was inpatient. Even though I was dying inside the whole time I was out of inpatient, I was never better. So when the ketamine came along and I started healing, actually healing, like not just band-aiding the scars and the deep wounds of my trauma and my mental illness, but actually like healing it, like that my symptoms just got better and better. Like I really started getting the silence for more time, like really started getting, no intrusive thoughts or even having bad days. It was more down to bad hours, and even to now, like you'll have bad days, you're human. But, it wasn't like I was in bed for a week. And, as it got better and better, like I was able to like get myself out, really quickly. And then my time started just getting longer and longer, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I
Wow.
was monthly for like the first 2.5 years. And then
Okay. So what do you think then about it seems like the common protocol is to do 6 treatments, and I thought it was a monthly thing, but I guess that they do it over possibly 2 or 3 weeks, like in a short period, you go on for 6 treatments.
So what you do is it's a minimum of 6. I do know some clinics that do 8, but they have a little
Yeah.
different. But it's a minimum of 6, and what they do is they start you with like a base level dose, and you do it over 2 to 3 weeks. I did mine over 2 weeks. Most people do it like 2 a week for 3 weeks. They start with a base level dose, based on their weight,
Yeah.
and then slowly over those 6, you titrate upwards. So you're kind of working towards your therapeutic dose. So by the 6th one, in theory, you should be at your therapeutic dose. Now, it's subjective. And I can tell you that right now, it took me longer than 6 infusions to really find that therapeutic dose. But when I found that chef's kiss dose, which is 80 milligrams, my healing just skyrocketed as well. So, but at 6, they are technically trying pretty much around your therapeutic dose. You may be like, you're in the range. And at that point,
Yeah.
you're now having a relationship with a clinic is very intimate and very personal. So you are telling them the whole entire time. If it's not working, if your slide's coming back, which is my definition of when your mental illness symptoms start to return, so you'll need another infusion. So yeah, so they I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, my dog
Oh,
will.
yeah. So if a person comes in and does one infusion and they walk out and they're like, that really didn't help me. I don't think ketamine's for me. Does that mean it really isn't helping them, or should they stick
No,
with
they
it
need
and
to stick
try
with
it?
it. They need to stick with it. Everybody responds at different times. So in those first 6, I've known people to take up to 10 to respond. That's more unusual, but most people don't even respond third, fourth, fifth. I responded, but I wasn't getting like complete relief. I just knew that it was working. Like something was right. I just knew it and just knew there was something right. Like I said, I just had a little crack in the smile. Not everything, I didn't have silence. I didn't have crazy silence. I still was having intrusive thoughts. You know what I mean? On the first one, but I could tell we were moving in the right direction. Like I had
Yeah.
tried so many different things that we were just moving in the right direction. And as I continued on, I tell my clients, please acknowledge the small accomplishments. The big ones will come. Like, just put your head down, and if you can say, I didn't flip out, and I would have flipped out before infusions, that's an accomplishment. If you can say, I was out of my room more, I don't really feel like staying in my room. These are small accomplishments. Everything's small accomplishments. They build. It's cumulative. So that's why it takes 6 to get up to that point, is because it builds. So I tell everybody, don't even worry. You're not even to your therapeutic dose yet. Like, don't even stress. Like, they're just working you up. Just working you up. Just stay the course. Like, it's doing its thing. Like, scientifically, we know those neural pathways are connecting. Like, you know what I mean? We know. You just stay the course. And that's like also part of my coaching, is when people are like, hey, this isn't working. Hey, no, wait. I'm able to come to them and say, no, 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 stay the course. You got this. Like, it's gonna happen. It's going to take some, some people are maybe worse than others, I don't know why some people respond to different times, but usually it's within the first 6. In the first 6, things happen. It's like ketamine, kind of where you've stuffed your, all your mental illness and your trauma down. It kind of is like an onion, like
Yeah.
that's an onion, and your ketamine is kind of like stripping it back in those first 6 to kind of get to the core of your healing. So I don't, you're just like stripping it back. So things can happen during those first 6. Sometimes in the second and third one are the hardest ones. It's kind of like the times that they strip back and you're like, that's when maybe trauma will come up a little bit, or things will get a little darker, because it's actually, and those are actually the most healing, surprisingly. But that's not, they don't always happen, but sometimes in the second and third ones, that's when like things really start to heal, and you like start to see it. It just really, it's all how people respond. But I tell them, stay the course. Like, don't worry, just do it. Just, you know what I mean? It's going to respond. Everybody's different. Just stay the course, do the integrations, do the work, do the healing, and you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it, and
Yeah.
and they do. And I can honestly say that there's not many people that I have met that have failed at ketamine. And the reasons why that I have realized that they do is, one, they're not ready. It's usually somebody that's family members that push them into it, that they're just not ready.
Yeah.
They're not committed to it. They don't like psychedelic, they just really aren't ready to do the healing, to put in the time, the accountability. The other one is a clinic fails them. I've seen so many clinics fail their patients, especially when they don't help them and don't guide them, and have nothing to offer, or it's a burn and turn clinic. I've seen some clinics, these people come to me, they're like, I don't even feel anything. I'm not in the, and they're like, and I look at their paperwork, and they're putting like Versed in before they even go in the infusion, like something that's like a last resort kind of medication that you shouldn't really use unless you have to like reverse something. Like, they're just putting it in so that they burn and turn, so they
There,
don't, so they can get out of it and they can get another person in. Like, those are
there,
the
there's
ones.
clinics I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's clinics that will actually give Versed before ketamine.
100%.
That's crazy. It's like you're almost like you're erasing the treatment before you even start.
Exactly. I can't believe sometimes when I read, like, sometimes they'll send me their super bill and their paperwork in the behind. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Or they'll tell them to take a benzo before they get there. What?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, that's
it's so counterintuitive. Like, I just worked with a girl on Saturday that told me that they put a benzo in before she even starts their infusion.
oh, yeah, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me at all.
Nothing, right? So like, there's clinics that fail, or they put the dose so high on these people that they can't even like do the work. They can't even heal because they're just blitzed. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah,
like, you're not supposed to be so out of this world that you cannot remember things. You're not supposed to use it as an anesthetic. It's not supposed to be anesthetic type doses or even pain level doses for mental illness. You know what I mean? It should be
yeah,
low. It should be lower, and they fail, these clinics fail them so much. Sometimes I can't even, sometimes I hate to get on Reddit because it's so depressing to me to see how many people stopped ketamine because they didn't realize that the clinics were failing them, that they thought it was them. Breaks my heart. It really does. If I could answer every single post on there telling them, no, 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 just find another clinic, just, you have to have the environment. You have to have the people on your side. You know what I mean? It's really sad.
yeah, yeah. And for anybody listening, just to Versed is a very potent benzodiazepine, like Klonopin, Xanax, or Ativan, and the whole point of giving it is so a person doesn't remember what happened to them, to calm them down. And they used to give it for colonoscopy, so people would be awake for the colonoscopy, but have no memory of that horrible experience of getting the colonoscopy. But it makes no sense giving something that's going to wipe out your memory for something that's supposed to be helping you to
You know,
to heal. Yeah, definitely. It's just crazy.
and I would say, for those that are nervous about doing this, there are ways that you can pull yourself out to that deep area that you go into. And it's as simple as taking your fingernail and scratching it on the chair. That will let you know you're still in the room, that you're good, that you're
Yeah,
right there. Just little things like that, flexing your toes in the chair. If you feel a little too deep and you feel a little out of body, if you just flex your toes. Things like that. So there's ways to teach, ways to reduce the anxiety. And most times if you can teach, if I can teach my clients these things and really get them to understand this can be very enjoyable, a very safe place for them to heal and things like that, it turns it around for them. It really is about mindset, you know what I mean? Going in,
yeah,
sorry, going into your, infusion with the mindset of I'm here to heal, I'm safe, I'm exactly where I need to be to do this. It changes the whole, like I said, you can literally change your whole entire infusion from dark to light really quickly, even just by
yeah,
imagining. If something gets really dark or you're not ready to process a trauma, you can change your music. If you have music, you can envision like a safe place. Like for me, it's a Caribbean on the Caribbean island. And then I think of all six of my senses to be able to, I think of all my senses, like, to be able to really create that environment. So I think of like the salt and the waves crashing in the stereo. I hear somebody talking in the background. So like I create this place of safety, and it'll take me out of like, if I feel like I'm, too deep or, I don't want to process something, you can change it. And that's
yeah.
like something I teach, is how to do those things.
Yeah. And just going back to something else you had said, that because I would have thought that maybe to some degree that more is better, like that, but I guess it's not. Like when you say like you find like a perfect dose, it's not too high, not too low. So say 80 works perfectly for you. That means that 100 or 120 would probably not be ideal.
And I don't want that high,
Yeah.
because I want to remember. I want to use the time to heal. I want to be not so far, gone that I can have rational thoughts during. So it's a lot of introspection for me. And I float between 76 or 75 and 80 milligrams, most times 80 milligrams. And then sometimes I'll go in and be like, no, I need 75. I'm not quite ready. I don't want to go as deep or, but it still does the same thing. I still get 6 months. But I figured this out with myself. But 80 milligrams, I have literally been on for 8 years. Like I have found my perfect dose. I do not need to keep increasing to make my ketamine better. I found my therapeutic dose. That's all I need. So I don't need to continue to
Yeah.
increase. That's not, sometimes my clients actually have to drop down to find their therapeutic dose versus up. It's like you
Yeah.
find that range and they have to figure out, the doctor may get them to a certain amount and they're like, okay, well, one's too, it's just too high here. And and maybe like if I drop a little bit lower, I won't be as, far in, and they find that dose. So I feel like it's a lot of talking with the patient, for a doctor, because it's subjective. It's completely subjective when it
Yeah.
comes to therapeutic dose. And some people, I know, I have a client that does 120. Like she needs 120. That's that. And she's at 6 months as well. She gets 6 months in between infusions. That's her therapeutic dose. That's what she needed. I only needed 80. So
Yeah.
it really just, it depends. And I think it's knowing what you need, and also, the fact that people have to take on the thought process that this isn't just a time to, blank out and not think. And there is, it's a therapy. It's
Yeah.
like, I think of ketamine as like, okay, like parallel therapies. So you have your ketamine, which is the administration of the medication. So it's going to give you symptom relief. Then you have like the ketamine infusion time, the experience that is like the real therapy that you can really go in and heal. and one will benefit the other. So the more healing you'll do, and you know that it's really just about processing and coming to terms with things, just healing. Of course your ketamine is going to work better because you're moving forward feeling better, like you have come to terms with things that have just turmoiled you for life.
Yeah.
So I think one benefits the other.
I,
But
I was
I
wondering,
will say, I will say that just because, and I tell my clients this, some of them are like, "Oh man, I didn't even remember anything, or I didn't see any visuals, or oh, that couldn't have taken." I'm like, no, no, no. It just because your experience wasn't the greatest, because I've had blah ones, and I haven't had, I've even slept through one before. Doesn't mean that my ketamine symptoms are not going to not, I'm still going to get relief. It's just I didn't get that healing therapy during that infusion. That's okay. But
yeah,
I still getting the benefit of getting the ketamine. So
yeah. I was wondering as far as the different ways of administering it. There's um, sublingual, which I know is probably not as accurate dosing, and you would have to take more to get the same effect. But are
yeah.
there any clinics that do supervised sublingual instead of IV, like for maybe people that don't like needles, or maybe that just a different way of doing it?
Yeah, actually, one in my hometown actually does. He does sublingual, and he does it either, you can either do it at home or he can do it in the clinic.
Yeah,
But yeah, there are therapists that are now using sublinguals, like you take it and because it's more of a microdose, they're able to do like a therapy with them during the time that they are like really relaxed and on that ketamine trope. Um,
yeah,
I personally wouldn't want somebody to speak to me because, especially during IV, because I'm trying to go as far into myself to access things. So if somebody was speaking to me during it,
yeah.
it would pull me back out. It would be like counterintuitive to me. But being that like sublinguals are more of like a microdose, like more
Would
like you could,
would that even be like, because I think that and I'm not really in favor that, there's companies that will ship it to your house, and it's
yeah.
probably not the best idea to do that. But I've heard that they give it in the range of like between 150 and 300 milligrams, which what I would imagine that might be kind of equivalent to that 80 milligram range, or somewhere in that 50 to 100.
Well,
I'm not really sure.
I think absorption, at least because I have two clients right now that actually do sublingual at home in between infusions, so their infusions last a little longer. So like instead of taking a benzo, where they would have taken a benzo, when they're feeling absolutely out of control and they need boosted, they'll do a lozenge at night, and that
Yeah,
resets their brain and gives them more time. But from what I understand, from what they tell me, and I've never done a lozenge, is
yeah,
that it's not as intense as an IV, and they think, or at least their theory is because the absorption. Um, they said sometimes it'll hit them harder than others, so I think it depends on what you're
yeah,
doing, yeah, things like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's hard to keep something under your tongue and let it fully absorb, and so it could be variable.
Yeah, yeah. So, but none of them have, I mean, none of them have said, and I also think because it also probably comes in a little slower than an IV that's like, either pump or,
Yeah,
drip is either 3 minutes or 12 minutes. I think it comes in slower because it's
yeah,
absorbed through your stomach, So I think that from what they tell me, it's not near as intense of a feeling. It's more of like a balance, like, it doesn't
yeah.
hit. So that's just what they had told me, but I wouldn't know directly, unfortunately, because I was very
It's,
fortunate in being so far along in my infusions that I never even had to consider even boosting or Spravato or Lawson. You know what I mean? I was already so far into my IV that it would have been counterproductive to go backwards to even try any of those.
yeah,
But I think that any way you can get the ketamine legally and under supervised care, any way you can get it, if it means IM, IV, troche, nasal spray, however you can do it, every single way is a way to heal during your experience. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter how you get it, you can absolutely benefit from any of those administrations. And unfortunately, most times infusions are not covered by insurance. I'm pretty lucky that part of mine is, but I tell people if you can only get the Spravato, I mean, and they cover it, do it.
yeah,
Like, don't deny yourself just because it's not administered through IV. you're going to get benefits. You can
Yeah.
work the system just the same way as IV.
Yeah, I've heard Spravato actually can be very effective, and with a clinic with a good billing department can probably make sure that it gets covered for most people.
My infusion is covered by 40%. And my clinic, actually, the front lady that does the billing was at my last clinic. So she was at one of the first clinics ever in the
Oh,
country.
wow.
So she's figured out that that they've created a super bill. They've split up the infusion into like doctor consultation codes and the infusion code. So they're able to get like the consultation part of my like
Yeah.
the doctor comes in and talks my, does all the jazz. They're able to get that part covered by insurance, which is awesome. But I can
Yeah.
honestly say I am very few clinics in this country that can do it. I
Yeah.
can say I can count three on my hands out of like what, like over 1,900 now that there are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's where a good billing department is, or billing person is important, because there is more to it. Like you're not just going in for an infusion. Some people may get therapy in the same clinic. They see a doctor, and all those are
medicine
separate from the.
management, a lot
Yeah.
of clinics medicine manage now, which I think is awesome. I think that's an amazing because they know, right? They know what medications you're on. It's you don't I can remember my clinic,
Yeah.
they'll call my psychiatrist just to kind of check in, tell her how I'm doing, things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting how resistant people are to when a treatment, and maybe it's only for things in the mental health field, but like medication assisted treatment, people usually think of Suboxone and
Yeah.
buprenorphine. They call it MAT, but MAT can really apply to a lot of things. It can apply to naltrexone to help people cut back on drinking, can apply to even to people now using Ozempic to lose weight.
Yeah.
And every time one of these things comes out, everybody like fights it. Like Suboxone, even after over 20 years, it's a miracle drug. It saved lives.
I
And
think
you still have the entire addiction treatment industry and rehab and recovery industry. All of them are like fighting it, saying, we
yeah.
don't believe in that. And,
It
same thing with a lot of these things.
it makes me really sad when a psychiatrist or a therapist is against ketamine.
Yeah.
Like it hurts my heart. It really does because it's life changing. It's life saving for severely mentally ill people.
Yeah.
And for them to, and for that, even my psychiatrist was like, no. And luckily I bucked up and was like, I'm still getting it. But so many people be like, oh, well, my psychiatrist doesn't agree with it, and then they miss out on this opportunity to actually be able to live. And it makes me sad. There's a big stigma to it, right? Because it's ketamine, party drug, horse tranquilizer, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact of the matter is it's absolutely life changing for people that suffer.
Yeah.
And it's not just a band-aid, right? It's not just like one symptom goes, they all go. Like you're literally getting silence in your brain that you just don't get, you know. And it's also not a band-aid. I feel like a lot of medications that I was on was just a band-aid just to treat symptoms and not actually get to what was causing my symptoms, why I was suffering. And I think that's the difference. And the fact that you're doing it yourself because you're the one in it, like you're relying on you to heal you.
Yeah.
It's like a soldier on the front lines. Like you are the one who can heal yourself. It's such a beautiful healing tool.
Yeah. Now, as far as you had mentioned the other psychedelics, and I know psilocybin is an upcoming one that probably will be legal in some years, and maybe even like FDA approved, not like cannabis, but like a whole, it's going to be a medical treatment. And I've heard some like dramatic it's dramatically effective when used properly. So even people that may have taken mushrooms years ago and said like, well, I saw a lot of visual stuff, and it was really neat, but it didn't cure
Yeah,
me from whatever. But apparently if it's used with very specific protocols, like I had heard on the Andrew Huberman podcast, he talked about that you have to have your eyes covered or closed. You can't have
absolutely.
your eyes open.
I say
um
the same with ketamine. You got to have your eyes closed, be in yourself. You can't just sit there and talk to people, be on your phone.
yeah. Yeah, the visual stimulation, it activates too much of the brain externally, I guess, and takes away from the healing process. um
I think that psychedelics are the future of mental health. I, you know, I went into my schooling doing transformative psychedelic coaching, so I learned all about all the different psychedelics, and all of them have such beautiful elements and they're all different, right? We have ayahuasca, we have psilocybin, we have DMT, we have MDMA. Um, they're it's the fact that you can process like traumas, and
Yeah.
it gives you time out of your brain, and but with psilocybin, especially microdosing, like just little bits, like you don't even have to trip, you don't have to go into those elements, like literally just a little bit a day
Yeah.
is showing so many people. Like I know so many people that just can't afford infusions, so
Yeah.
some psilocybin and they get a lot of relief. So I think that it's the future. It's absolutely the future. I mean, MDMA
Yeah.
is really close to be. Ibogaine, I don't know if you know much about Ibogaine, but that's like the future of getting people to
Yeah.
withdrawal off of drugs quickly, safely, and be able to process things at the same time. They're just seeing huge, like Kentucky has, they've just like put a lot of money into the study of it.
Yeah.
So that's going to be like huge in the drug, recovery industry eventually.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They just I know that people have been trying to come up with different versions of ibogaine that are safer, that maybe don't
Yeah,
have the cardiac risk and other issues. Um,
unfortunately, there is that cardiac risk.
what about you mentioned ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is in some cases legal when it's given as part of like a church ceremony.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
but I've heard like one person I spoke to, did ayahuasca like I don't know how many times, and they came out of it kind of like a vegan, like we can't hurt animals and we have to save the earth. And somebody might say like, oh, I'm kind of afraid of turning into that person. I don't know if I'm going to come out of it like, which could be a good thing. Maybe it's good for
Right.
us. And then you hear Will Smith reported he did like 20 ayahuasca sessions in 2 years, and then he went and slapped Chris Rock on stage, which for all we know could be good for him long term. Nobody really got hurt that bad, and
Right.
maybe it's good for him to spend more time at home or whatever. But what do you think of ayahuasca?
So ayahuasca, I think, first I want to address what you said about people like changing. The thing about psychedelics, or when you're getting relief, like, processing relief, things like that, is you're not the same person. And a lot of times you're masking, especially when you're mentally ill. You mask. And a lot of times you'll take on other people's likes and stuff because you just are so tired that you just don't know who you are. You just don't. So a lot of times with these psychedelics, it's kind of like a journey to finding you. That person that became vegan and that environmental person may have always been that person. You know what I mean? And so the changing, I don't necessarily see as a bad thing, because I feel like you drop your mask and you drop your defenses and you really figure out who you are. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad. I don't think everybody necessarily comes out as an environmental person. You know what I mean? But I'm
Yeah.
totally different. Even from ketamine, I was a quiet people pleaser, and now I'm like loud and an advocate, and just like, so I think that you do change,
Yeah.
especially especially with mental illness. You do really try to find yourself. And I think every psychedelic does that. So ayahuasca is, you do a lot of purging. So it's very intense, and you're gonna do a lot of purging. And that can mean you vomit, that can mean you poop, that can mean you laugh, cry. It's very intense. I know many people that absolutely think they come back for months feeling great. Like it's more like a very extended period of time off of just like one ayahuasca journey. So a lot of people come back totally different person because they don't hurt, or they process something, or they had during their journey, they figured out that they do love environment. I had a person just in ketamine, one of my clients, they come to me and they said, you know what, I realized during ketamine, I do not like being active. I have always exercised my whole life, and now I'm just like, I don't really like being that excessive active. She's like, I'm gonna still exercise, but I'm not gonna be excessive anymore because that wasn't me. She's like, I don't know why I did that. That was not even me. And so I think there's a lot of like changing in you.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see as a bad thing. But ayahuasca, is very intense. You are going to you're going to probably have an ego death. You're going to strip away every bit. You're going to experience some major healing, but it's going to be intense for
Yeah.
sure.
And there's no medical supervision. So for people that want to stay within the healthcare system, ketamine is
Right.
the way to
It's just a
go.
sitter, and that's a sitter, and they're not medically certified. They're
Yeah.
just Joe Schmo that went through a certification, to know, to help you, like relax and things like that. But like if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
um, I know somebody that did Bufo and died,
Oh,
after so many. So, there is a danger to psychedelics. That's why I love ketamine. Being that I am versed in all the other psychedelics, I feel so safe with ketamine. And not only is it legal, I have, health professionals watching over me. And I can really heal in that environment because I know I'm safe. So if machines go off or whatever, they know. And of course, we know that ketamine is very, very, very safe. Very
yeah.
medication to be administered to you as well. So
And,
there's a lot of unknowns when you use other psychedelics.
yeah, that's true. Especially that they haven't really been,
Yeah.
things haven't been defined, and like we're talking about the very precise dosing and defining protocols and finding out what works best for a person. Like I heard a guy in a podcast talking about how the the guy that did, I forgot what they call him, the shaman that got his ayahuasca ready,
Yeah.
he accidentally made it way too strong, and he said that it was like a complete death experience, and it was,
Yes.
and he said he
I
never
agree.
wants to do it again, and the shaman will never do it again. It's like, so you don't really know what you're definitely going into.
No, and you don't. There's how can you regulate? It's kind of hard to regulate that kind of stuff. At least right now,
Yeah,
I will be able to regulate it when it becomes legal. Um, but it also, that's the thing, right? Kind of coming back to ketamine, like doses are subjective as well.
yeah,
So it's going to be interesting when these things do come about and become legal. Because I think psilocybin, isn't that legal? That's legal in Colorado now, isn't it?
it might be. I know that a lot of places are decriminalizing it. I
Yeah.
think like Washington D.C., I think you can buy it in shops. It's decriminalized, and I'm sure Oregon, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's different places where you can get it legally. Like where maybe you pay for the bag and they throw in the stuff for free or whatever. Like different ways of,
Right. Like DC
yeah,
used to be with cannabis and stuff. You got your delivery, you bought the swag and it came with a free. Yeah, that's probably how a lot of them are handling it right now. I don't.
yeah,
I think and then that's the thing. I think that the use of psychedelics in a safe, very safe. Yeah, I'm all about safety, and legality. And because I worry, right? I worry when somebody's doing something illegally, which most psychedelics besides ketamine are in most states. You worry about what's in it, if it was done right, what if it was laced? I worry about those things. So
yeah,
that's why I prefer ketamine, because I know that I'm safe and I'm getting medical grade ketamine. And
yeah,
it's a safety thing for me. It makes
yeah,
me feel
yeah. People should keep that in mind. Like even decriminalized psychedelics, like even if you buy it from what looks like a really fancy, nice, clean shop, it's still not legal and regulated. It's
better.
still,
You just don't know.
yeah,
You really just don't know what you're gonna get, unfortunately, right now.
yeah. So what do you think about legal medical cannabis being used in conjunction with ketamine? Is there any benefit to that?
I'm a daily cannabis user, actually. So the way I look at cannabis during the 20 plus years that and I've been using cannabis for 30 years. So I truly feel, and I've always called it a medication for myself, even as a young buck. I was
Yeah,
like, when everything else was failing me, when all the medications were just not working, that was the one thing that kept my nose, at least my nose above the water. It
yeah,
kept me from dying. So I use it as a medication. I will use RSO when I have cramps. I will use THC balm. I will use, edible, also for pain, things like I use it as a medication. So I think in conjunction with, first off, I do not use, anybody that's hearing this, please do not use cannabis before you come into ketamine. Don't do
okay,
it.
that's good to
Give
know. Yeah,
give yourself, if you're a daily cannabis user like myself, I stop, I will smoke before I go to bed, and then I will not use it until after ketamine. So just, that it's just better. You want to be fresh. You want to be free-minded to go into your ketamine. So you don't want to have cannabis. You don't want to, but I think that it works beautifully as a medication. I mean, if I have an ailment, I'll use it, and yes, I use it daily, but it's like a micro dose type of thing. I realized I only need, you know,
yeah,
one little thing of it and I'm good. Like it's my, I can sleep, but I use it as a medication. So I think that cannabis is a beautiful tool. I know in Australia they have cannabis therapy. So they use very high doses of cannabis oil, and kind of like ketamine, and they have cannabis therapy. So there's definitely like I see so many good benefits of cannabis. The only thing I worry about now is like the stronger ways to do it. I'm seeing people are getting like serotonin syndrome from it
Yeah.
because they're on other medications and doing like high level of like dab type of like percentages, like, cannabis green, maybe like 30%. When you're starting to do this higher dose of concentrate, you're talking like 90s. And then you see these people getting like these new cannabis type of
Yeah.
syndromes, and also serotonin. Was that serotonin? What's that called? Serotonin
Yeah.
syndrome.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I see so many people get that, and the other cannabis, I forget what it's called, the cannabis syndrome, a lot now.
Yeah. And
So
that's probably, I mean, not that it was wrong for them to legalize it the way they're doing it, but maybe there should have also been like a parallel branch of medical cannabis of medical in the sense of, this is precisely what we have in here. And I
right.
know you can buy highly regulated THC tablets, that they use for chemotherapy,
Yeah.
but maybe they need to. I mean, because there's so much variation, like different strains and percentages of this kind or that kind of cannabis and terpenes, and there's just like so much to it, and if that
Absolutely.
could be like very well defined, like this is precise what you're getting, and this is what's best for you, and have it be medically regulated also.
Absolutely. And I will say that the dispensaries, at least in this state, are pretty good about putting like if the lanolin or what variants are in it, and they're pretty versed. These people that work there are pretty versed in, if you come in there and say, look, I need something for pain, but I don't want to be really tired, they're able to say, okay, this has this percentage of this is this percentage of this should not make you tired, make you uplifted, energetic. They do
Yeah,
that. But I think that these higher dose like when you're talking, you're getting up in like 70, 80, 90% THCs, you're just seeing more things come about, like disorders, you
yeah,
know. And they
but
just, in our state, they made, so we have recreational, but they just allowed those really high concentrations to become recreational. Before it was only medical. You'd only
yeah,
get the medical with medical cards. Now it's recreational. So you're just seeing it more and more. These like,
yeah, yeah. I think that's coming up for a vote this year in Florida, like about possibly having recreational also. So yeah, I was thinking while you were talking for a while before, there's a Star Trek movie, Star Trek Five, and it's not one of the most popular Star Trek movies because it was kind of like a low budget one. But there's in that movie there's a Vulcan character, not Spock, but another guy, and he does a therapy where he removes trauma from people. He goes into their past trauma and he puts his hands on them, and it like almost instantly you see like some flashbacks of what happened to them, and now the trauma's gone, and now they're just happy and smiling, and everything is great. Well, there's a scene where Captain Kirk is offered the therapy and he refuses, and he said, "My pain is what makes me who I am," and he doesn't want to go through it. And you always wonder, like, well, maybe for him, maybe that's what makes him do his job really well. Maybe for someone who's in a critical position like that, you don't want to make them all happy and not paranoid. Maybe his pain does make him good at his job, but for most of us that are just getting through life and being, maybe people are miserable with depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, bipolar, the whole list of things that ketamine can help with. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to get rid of some of that trauma and heal a bit.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that, it's the way I look at, it could define a person, but your brain is literally trying to die when you're mentally ill, and your body's trying to live. And so, like, to take that feeling away that your brain is doing everything possible to die. It's telling you the worst things about yourself. It's telling you to die. It's telling you intrusive thought. What I mean? It's giving you the full on beat down to die. Like, that's what it wants
Yeah,
to do. And so when you take that out of you take that and it goes away, you're actually able to get out of your own way and live. You're actually able to live instead of just survive. And that's what you're doing when your brain's trying to die on you.
Yeah. Or I've also heard people say that, when your brain, when your brain is telling you negative things about yourself, that it's being protective, that it's keeping you from, protecting you from danger, like just like how, like, don't jump off a cliff or don't walk in front of a lion, like for people hundred thousands of years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Like for us, it's protecting us from danger. And maybe that, someone's thinking, I need to quit this job and start that company I always wanted to do, or I need to, get out of this bad relationship.
And I'll
Um,
come out in infusions. That's what's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, because your brain is like stopping you, like maybe this relationship is terrible, but it's safe. Maybe you're going to be in a lot of danger when you get out of it, and that's something that we need to try to overcome.
Yeah. And and speaking of like what kind of playing off what you said, one of the things that a lot of my clients will realize or see is that maybe they aren't in a healthy relationship. Um, because they can't, I call it narc enlightened. It's just my term. When the kid, you start being able to not, you can't unsee things anymore in your life because you were so tired before and mentally ill, you just let a lot of things go because you were just fighting yourself. And then as you get healthier, you can't unsee things. And so that's where those thought processes in your infusions are like, I got to create changes, boundaries, get rid of this person, this person. I mean, those are really like, you really have those type of thoughts. Like, it's almost like you're creating a plan sometimes during your infusions of how you really should be treated or who should be in your life or, when you get out of your own way, things become very clear.
Yeah. Well, Dena Roland, thank you. It's incredible, all these things that you've helped us with, and I think you've given us some great advice for anybody to hear, even if they're not ready for thinking about ketamine.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, thank you, Dena. I was wondering, how can people find you, if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, so not only do I advocate on social media sites, I've been doing that for 4 years. You can find me on, and I do a lot of educational videos and things like that. At I am the number 4 K-Trip. So I am 4 K-Trip, or you can find me on my website, ketamine-integrationcoach.com.
Okay, great. If they go to your website, can they then connect to the social media?
Yes, absolutely. They can connect to my social media. And I also, if they want to come on my website, I always put my infusion videos. I video myself during my infusions.
Oh,
You can get a real life look at what an infusion's like.
oh, that's great. For people thinking about trying it out, and being afraid of, like, what does it look like
Yeah.
exactly?
You see everything from me walking in the door to talking to the doctors to getting hooked up to me actually going into my treatment. So you
Oh,
get to
wow.
see it all.
Well, that's great. Okay, thank you, Dina. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.